One thing that's kind of interesting about modern day society is that we have all these new companies that we didn't have before, like Airbnb and Uber and Lyft. And when they came into the picture, they kind of were industry disruptors, no longer were people jumping into taxi cabs to go to the airport because you could just do an Uber for half the price or maybe even less. Or same thing with Airbnb. Airbnb came out, it's like, why am I gonna stay in a hotel when I can stay in a full, nice furnished place with a kitchen and everything for half the price? Well, a lot of people don't realize that the reason that a lot of those things were half price back then is because all of those prices were subsidized by the original capital investors of those companies. People pumped billions of dollars into companies like Airbnb and Uber and Lyft in order to basically make it cheaper, to give people a reason to use it, right? Like, wow, this is such a good deal, to kind of like lure people into using it, and then eventually have the idea to raise the price, which brings us to today. That's exactly what they've done. They've raised the price so much, in fact, that many people are deciding to no longer use these services, including me. In fact, I even made a whole video a few months back in April whenever I took my wife to Palm Coast. We stayed in an Airbnb for a week up there, and it was one of the worst Airbnb experiences we've ever had, especially for the amount of money it costs. It was very unsatisfying, and it made me feel like to the point where I never want to stay in another Airbnb again. In fact, I'll talk a little bit more about that later in this video, because a lot of people might ask, like, well, how are you staying in California for so long then, Michael? Well, it's not an Airbnb. I'll let you guys know about that. But the other thing is, guys, I'm not alone in this. A lot of millennials and even Gen Zers are starting to turn their back on these companies as well because of how much the prices have gone up. For me, it's not about the price. That's actually one of the reasons, but the main reason is how bad of an experience it's been combined with the price. It's not worth the price. If you're gonna give that bad of an experience, that needs to be a lot cheaper to compensate for how much this sucks, is kind of how I feel. But between 2019 and the end of 2022, Airbnb's average daily rate went up 36%. Guys, talk about inflation. Well, yeah, that's a lot higher than the reported inflation numbers, first of all. But more people are starting to catch on that these services are no longer a good deal. In fact, they talked to one other millennial for this story who used to use Uber and Lyft all the time to get back and forth to the airport, but now she's figured out that just parking at the airport for a few days is actually cheaper than the round trip fare when you need to get an Uber or a Lyft. And even when I got here, guys, when I arrived to San Francisco and I flew in, first time I flew since the pandemic. And then when we got to the airport, I was like, why am I gonna stand around looking for an Uber or a Lyft to come when literally you can walk outside the front of the airport and there's a line of taxi cabs just sitting there waiting to take you. And even if it ends up being slightly more expensive, it's a lot more convenient because they're sitting right there. And at least these guys are ready to work. They're ready to make it happen right now. Like, it's late at night. I got in at, 10:30 at night. I want to get to the hotel room and start relaxing. So that's exactly what we did. We didn't hire an Uber or Lyft. We just jumped into the taxi. They took us to our hotel and we were there in 5 minutes. So this woman who used to use all these services all the time, including Airbnb, she said, if I was using the ride shares and the delivery apps like Uber Eats and Grubhub and those things, and everything the way I was before the pandemic, I would run out of money each month. That's how much these places have raised their prices. So they're standing to lose a tremendous amount of business right now. And as you guys can see, I'm in San Francisco again, and I'm gonna walk around the marina a little bit over here. And in case anybody's wondering where my wife Lizzie is, I would love if she was here walking with me, but no, she has to stay in the car and babysit the car to make sure that we don't get broken into. So unfortunately, she's on security duty while I'm out here making the video. And yeah, maybe we could just leave it and everything would be fine, but it's like, I don't want to take the chance, guys. We're out here. If we get a busted window, it's gonna put a damper on the trip, to say the least. So unfortunately, that's what it's come to around here. But it's not just Uber and Lyft and Airbnb that's suffering. You also have companies like WeWork and Sprig, Flywheel, Blue Apron. All these big companies were subsidized by their venture capital backers and made prices artificially low for a while, thinking they were just going to lure people in and then they would love it so much that they're going to stick around after the prices have went up. But that's actually not the case. Surprise, surprise. Especially now in a time of high inflation when people can't afford regular life anymore. So what are people doing instead? Well, instead of staying in Airbnb, they're out looking for hotel deals once again. Instead of taking Uber and Lyft, they're taking public transportation. And the interesting thing is these companies have never had to survive a recession. In fact, all these companies, came about after the previous recession. These were all startups back then, and was able to rise up as we were recovering from the GFC. But now that we're entering this recession, I don't know if these guys are going to make it. I mean, take Uber Eats for example, guys. If you want to get something as simple as a pizza delivered on Uber Eats, you could be looking at like $40 plus, when if you just called the pizza place directly to get it delivered, you could easily save like 10 bucks. So a lot of times it doesn't make sense because they charge all these extra hidden fees and service fees and delivery fees. Then you still got to tip the driver on top of that. Just ends up not being worth it unless they send you a coupon. And it's no wonder that people are choosing alternatives, because besides Airbnb, just between 2019 and 2022, Uber rose their prices by 45%, guys. 45% in just 3 years. And it's probably even higher now because that's data only as of 2022. Okay? Instacart fees, they went up by 61%. You have a Peloton membership, that went up from $39 to $44. Even I just saw today that Disney Plus and Hulu, ESPN, which is all under the umbrella of Disney Plus, they're raising their subscription fees. So everything that used to be cheap is no longer. So people are going to start questioning if these apps and services are really worth the new price. And in many cases, a lot of people are saying that they aren't. In fact, I don't really use any of this stuff anymore, which brings me to the story of how I'm here. Because the last couple of times I came to California, I always stayed in Airbnbs, guys. But the experience was always, lackluster, to say the least, and was also very expensive. So this year, I figured since I'm going to be staying here for a long time, longer than I've ever stayed here before, then I'm just going to rent an apartment, like a real place, So that's exactly what I did. I rented a real apartment here that cost me less than half of what it would cost me to get an Airbnb, and I put my own stuff in there. I rented some furniture, we bought some things for the place, and when I leave, I'm gonna throw it all in a storage unit for 150 bucks a month, and it'll sit there and wait for me until I'm ready next time to come back. So it's a very cheap alternative to doing Airbnb, especially since I keep returning to the same place, and I couldn't be happier with the decision. And not only is it cheaper to do what we're doing and just renting a real apartment, but I just actually like it so much more, because when you rent an Airbnb, it's like, oh, sometimes you don't like the couch, you don't like the TV. Those are big ones for me. It's just not as comfortable as you would make it on your own. Well, now I can do whatever I want because it's like having a second home, right? I have extra stuff here that's all my stuff, and we can make it as comfortable as home, or pretty close anyways. And I think it's a fabulous alternative to Airbnb. And it only works if you're gonna be staying in the same place long term like I'm doing, but it's something that people should consider if you're going to be staying somewhere for a few months out of the year rather than doing Airbnb. In fact, when I was just doing real estate, a lot of my early business were seasonal clients that would come down to Florida during the winter, and they would rent a condo for 3, 4, 5 months out of the year. I mean, this was before Airbnb was even a thing. So there are alternatives to things, guys, and riding in a taxi cab is just like being in an Uber. It's no different, and it's a lot more convenient most of the time. So I don't see the appeal for these companies or how they're going to make it through this recession. One major problem that we all are dealing with right now is how all these big companies that you buy something from collect a ton of your data, your name, your phone number, your email address, all sorts of stuff like that. And they save it in their databases, but yet they don't do anything to protect that information. And that's why today's video is sponsored by DeleteMe. DeleteMe is a hands-free subscription service that will remove your personal information that's being sold online. Delete Me's privacy experts remove you from hundreds of data brokers all year long, and they'll remove information like personal data, like your phone number, your address, because otherwise they'll take this information and they sell it without your permission to companies that shouldn't have that information, and they use it to market to you. They'll use it to try to steal your identity. They'll sell it to whoever just to get the money. I did a few internet searches on myself and I saw the amount of info that I could easily find online, and that's what made me decide to sign up for Delete Me. If you value your privacy like I do and you want to start cutting down on how much of your information is out there on the internet, make sure to sign up for Delete Me today. Get 20% off by joining with my link down below, joindeleteme.com/board and arrow, or you can use the QR code on the screen. Just snap a picture of it and sign up for Delete Me today. They talked to another kid who's 26, Gen Zer, that used to use all these services as well. And he said since prices have gone up, he's shifted his routine, and rather than going in an Uber, he's more likely to take the ferry instead, which I'm looking forward to doing at some point here, taking the ferry, and then Lizzie can come with me. Instead of going to a WeWork for the office, he's using his building's amenities instead where he lives, using the common area business center, stuff like that. And he thinks that if he was doing everything the same as he was before the pandemic, then it would literally cost him double to do so, which makes sense when you hear how much these companies have increased their fees. I mean, you literally used to have Ubers that were like 15, maybe 20 bucks max, are now $40, guys, for the same Uber. And this has also been a sneaky way that has helped keep the economy in better shape than it otherwise would be. Because if you think about it, if prices on certain services like Uber and Lyft and Airbnb, all these things are artificially low, then that helps people save more money. It helps them spend more money on alternative things, going on other vacations, spending money at other stores and restaurants, whatever. But now that people don't have that extra money, that creates a double whammy contraction. These businesses not only lose money because of higher prices, but also people who continue to use those businesses won't have the extra money to spend at other places. So this is exactly how it works in the real economy too. We had interest rates artificially low for close to 2 decades. People were able to borrow more money and spend more money because borrowing money was cheap. But now that that's no longer the case, you're seeing a huge pullback in how many items people buy that need to be financed, or how much spending is happening in general, because when somebody does need to finance something, it costs the appropriate amount and not the small subsidized amount like it has for so many years. And here's the other thing, all this subsidy money to keep these companies going for so long, all was possible because of low interest rates. And now that low interest rates are no longer there, these companies are not able to borrow as much to help the success of these companies anymore. So now they got to start charging the real price, and now that people are getting smacked with reality and seeing, yeah, an Uber actually has always cost $40, it's just that it was hidden because interest rates were low, it's going to cause problems. This is all happening at the same exact time that people need to change their spending habits anyways, because inflation has taken such a massive toll on their personal budgets. And here's something else to think about before we change the subject, is that all these companies, Uber, Lyft, Blue Apron, you name it, all these companies that have been subsidized by low interest rates for a very long time, as people stop using their services, guess what happens? They end up losing customers, and they end up having to lay off workers, which just reinforces the situation that we're in, guys, where we're in this horrible economy and people are losing jobs left and right because the business is not there anymore. Something I mentioned briefly in yesterday's video is the layoffs at Dell. But let's talk about it a little bit further. And that's 12,500 people who are also going to be losing their job very soon. A nice view of the Golden Gate Bridge for you guys. Some people have asked me to walk across it, but think about this, guys. You saw just in that shot I showed you how foggy it is, right? And you can see how windy it is where I'm walking right here. That's how it is most of the time. There are some clear days, but even if it is clear, the wind up there is insane. So if I walk up there, you guys aren't going to be hearing too much of me. You're going to be hearing more of the wind than anything. And I have a special microphone that kind of mitigates against that, but even that might not be enough for the wind up there, because it's probably like a good 30 miles an hour plus wind constantly up there. But anyways, getting back to Dell, according to them, they're able to lay off 10% of their workforce because they are looking to streamline their efforts into modern IAT and AI, which is yet another example of AI taking jobs away from humans. And that's the idea, right? The whole reason behind AI is to increase productivity of a company. So if I can increase my productivity and get rid of 12,500 people, and increase my profit margins, then that's great. That's exactly what we want to do, which is ironically enough one of the arguments that a lot of people are using right now about why the economy is still so good, because you see productivity ramping up, you see these corporate profits going up, which is all because people are getting fired and because of AI. And also something else to mention here is this literally just happened a few days after we saw Intel announced that they're going to be getting rid of 15,000 people. And part of the reason that Intel is having problems as well is because there are hardware issues with their Raptor Lake chips, which means that a lot of people should have probably been fired because they weren't doing their job. Where's the quality control with all these chips, right? So if you have a Raptor Lake Intel chip in your computer, it might be defective. And you know what else happened? As the stock market was coming down over the past few days, there was so many people looking to sell off and so many trades happened at once that you had the trading platforms like Vanguard, Fidelity, TD Ameritrade, E-Trade, and others going down in response to this stock market drop. So trades couldn't happen. Literally in one day, $2 trillion was erased from the stock market. So it's funny how it can just go up, up, and up without anything breaking, right? But then as soon as it goes down, that's when all the platforms break. Like, oh, you can't sell, we can't give you any money back. That wouldn't be good. There's a couple other things I want to mention here. I saw a news story out of San Francisco showing that the Wells Fargo banks here, they have a protocol that when they open up first thing in the morning, they have all their employees stand outside one by one, scattered across the block to make it look like they don't actually work there, and they let them in only one by one. And the reason that they're doing this is for safety. They don't want anybody rushing the door and trying to ambush and break in. And the funny thing is, the local news reporters are like stunned that this is happening only here in San Francisco, because they confronted one of the employees at Wells Fargo and they said, well, this is a nationwide procedure. So they sent a reporter over to New York and saw, hey, do they do this in New York City as well? Turns out they don't. So the funny thing is, the crime is so bad here that this is how they have to open the bank to make sure that people don't rush the door and come in and try to rob the place. Even though Wells Fargo says it's a nationwide security protocol, this isn't something that they actually do in other places. And if you would think if they did it anywhere else, that it would probably be New York, but apparently not. And the funny part about it to me, guys, was just how the reporters that did this story thought it was so shocking and surprising that they're only doing this here in San Francisco, as if that comes to a surprise to them. Like, you guys are the ones that report on all the crime here 24/7, and yet you guys are surprised when you see procedures like this at the bank. It's like an absolute joke, like even the people that report the crime can't believe that it's that bad that it's come to this, but it actually has. One thing that they even said in this story, which was pretty funny, is that why are they so worried about this? There's only been 8 bank robberies so far in San Francisco this year. Only 8. There should be 0, right? And people wonder why all these businesses are packing up and leaving. It's been on the news a lot this week, showing all the employees at X have to pack their bags and leave. They're completely leaving the city of San Francisco. If they want to keep their jobs, they're going to have to move to Texas, okay? And then the same thing's happening with Chevron. These guys have been here for like 150 years in California, and they're only just now leaving because things have gotten so bad to the point where these businesses can't make money. Between the bad policies, between the high taxes, you can't make money as a company here. And so it's easier to just leave and go somewhere else where it's more productive. So I feel like California in general is going to see a major downturn in the future once they start losing enough residents, once they start losing enough high ticket companies like this that create lots of jobs and pay a lot of these high salaries. Prices here for everything's gonna have to come down because people aren't gonna be able to afford this stuff anymore, guys. And I want to give you guys a couple of real life anecdotes straight from you. And my wife Lizzie's been helping me with this. She's been saving some of your comments to put in the videos like this. And here's a couple of them I want to share that kind of reinforce where we're at right now with the state of affairs with business and the economy. The first one is facts. Front-end software engineer, 10 years experience. My startup laid off everyone May 1st. 570 job applications done since, no offers, 8 interviews, having to rely on unemployment for the first time ever at age 38. That is terrible, guys. Like, applying for 570 jobs and only getting 8 interviews and no job offer is horrendous. That shows you how fake the jobs numbers are. It shows you how many of these job listings themselves are also fake. And it also is another reinforcement of how weak this economy is. You have another person who said, I have a small pawn shop. I can tell you how people are really struggling lately. My loans have really went up. People picking up their items has fell, and people are selling me items every day. And it's from all walks of life. Sales have fallen really bad too. I don't know what's going to happen before it gets better. So working at a pawn shop is kind of like one of the bellwethers for the economy. You know, the more stuff people trade in on loan and pawn things away, the more people that actually need money. You know, they're so desperate for cash that they're willing to give something up in return for getting that quick fix of income. And if most people don't pick up their items, it means that they don't have the money to come back and pay back that loan to get their stuff back. So none of this is a good sign of where things are headed. But it's good that we hear these things and we know about it, because it reassures us of where things are going and what to be ready for next. It's reasonable to expect that the economy is going to continue to slow down, business is going to continue to slow down, things that used to be cheap are now going to be expensive, and that's going to be permanent, and it's just going to be the way it is. And you need to find some way to be able to navigate and handle all that moving forward. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And if you don't want to wait for my next video to come out, check out this one on the screen right over here, and I will see you in the next one.